Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight to this episode of Back Porch Conversations. Whether you're listening or watching for the first time or you're with us every single week, I want to say thank you for your support and for the privilege of being able to continue to share with you people's stories and experiences. I fully believe that we will all grow in the unity and love that we desire for one another when we stop making assumptions about people and just start genuinely listening to other people. Tonight, I'm honored to have a friend of mine, a new friend of mine, Jessica Frazier, with me on my back porch. And I'm going to share more about her in just a moment. But before we do that, I want to start the way we start every week, which is why. Why do we do this? A few months back, I was reading through the New Testament as this kind of global pandemic hit, if you will, in March. And I began to read through the book of Mark, and I was convicted as I read this passage in a really fresh way. And I feel like just kind of changed the way that I perceived really life and how I treat other people. And this is what it says in Mark chapter 2. It says, soon the house where Jesus was staying was so packed with visitors that there was no more room even outside the door. While he's preaching God's word to them, 4 men arrived carrying a paralyzed man on a mat. And they couldn't bring him to Jesus because of the crowd. So they dug a hole through the roof above his head, and they lowered the man on his mat right down in front of Jesus. Here's what I love about this passage, that these men, these 4 men that carried this paralyzed man, were not paralyzed. They didn't understand his journey. They didn't understand his struggles. They didn't understand his plight. But they did understand that he needed help. They leaned in, they learned, they listened, but then they took action. And that's what I love about this particular passage and why I think it's so relevant to us today. I think it's important for us to hear people's stories, to lean in, to learn, to listen, but then also to take action, because that action will produce change. So why do I bring people to my back porch? Well, I think it's important to note that the back porch tends to be one of the most intimate places in our houses. It's where some of the most intimate conversations occur. Not everybody gets to come to your back porch because you had to come through the whole house. You got to see your mess. You got to see your brokenness. You got to see your dirty, all the way to your back porch. And so it's important to note that you don't just bring anybody back here. You bring people you want to learn from, you want to listen to, and you want to have a relationship with. And so with that, I bring people to my back porch because that's exactly what I want to do. I want to lean in, I want to learn, I want to listen, and then I want to take action. And so with that in mind, I believe that these conversations that we have are worth having. They're conversations that we should be having more frequently than just maybe on a YouTube channel or a Facebook platform. They should be happening in our dining room tables and all over our life cycles. So with that in mind, I want to encourage you tonight to take a few minutes before we dive in to share, to like, to subscribe, to do all those things you do for the content that you enjoy, to share with people you know would benefit from learning, and really, hopefully, continue to be a part of the conversation even after tonight finishes. So, without further ado, I want to welcome my friend Jessica Frazier. Thank you so much for coming on my back porch tonight and for being on your back porch as well. I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell everybody a little bit about where you are and what you're doing.
Well, thank you for having me, Chris. My name is Jessica Frazier, and I'm the founder and executive director of Straight Street Life Center, which is located in Douglasville, Georgia.
So good. Well, I appreciate you taking some time. So we're going to talk about a couple of things tonight. We're going to talk about your ministry at Straight Street and what that looks like and what that is. But before we dig into that, I would love for us to kind of talk through the race issues as well that we've been discussing. So when for you did you learn that racism was real, that people were treating you differently because of the color of your skin?
Wow. Well, we can go all the way back to childhood for that. I was uh, raised in Texas, a little small town, actually born in my grandmother's house. And, but yeah, as a little girl, I don't remember an age of exposure, but I knew that things were different for me.
Hmm.
There was one incident where at school, I had this really best friend, like I loved her to life, and her name was what is Liberty.
Hmm.
And Liberty felt the same way about me. We might have been about 7 or 8. And Liberty, we used to walk to school. There was no buses. We had to walk to school. So Liberty was like, come home with me. And I was like, okay. And go home with her. What she didn't tell me was that her World War II veteran grandfather was very prejudiced.
Wow.
And was not short on words, had no filter. And I don't even remember being afraid of him. Just remember thinking, wow. Because she even looked at him and grabbed my hand and just guided me, through.
Yeah.
So that was just like one of many experiences as a kid.
That's so traumatic, I feel like, because I mean, obviously, it's such a tender age. My kids are obviously 5 and 9. To think that they could have, could experience something like that, even when they get bullied at school now, I get upset and want to do something about it. And so to hear stories, not just yours, but so many others as well, that are like, as a child, I was hearing this, I was learning this, I was being spoken to differently. It breaks my heart to know that people are treated differently just because of how they look. Did that change you? Did that change the way that you treated yourself, change the way you presented yourself to other people, the way you talked or acted, or what you would say?
Well, not the way I treated people, because it was just something back then that you grew up knowing that Black boys didn't go with white girls, or vice versa.
Yeah.
You grew up knowing that you were not going to be treated fairly by the whites in town. It was just something that was implanted in us. It was just implanted in us. And so for me to be the type of person that I am, it was nobody but God. My friends, like I said, Liberty at school, we weren't just schoolyard friends. We were best friends. And like, she didn't even see the difference, even living with a prejudiced grandfather. Like, so I think it is definitely taught in the home, but the child doesn't have to receive, that heart of hatred. But then again, if that's all they see, because I'm not sure, I don't think she started out with them. Is a good, I should make that point.
Yeah.
I don't think she started out with her grandparents. So that could have been the difference, with her. Like, she already knew that, no, Jessica's not different. She's a Black girl, but she's my friend. So because we stayed friends. And I mean, this man went in. Why'd you bring the nigger here? Just
Wow.
I mean, just went in.
Yeah.
And she just kind of like, I just remember her looking and grabbing my hand and just guiding me through. And I mean, we were like 7 or 8 years old. But like I said, I don't think I was afraid because I knew the culture in this area. Like, this was, even early 80s, but there was still the potential of someone being hung in this area. A matter of fact, there was it was alleged that my uncle, because of an interracial relationship, was murdered by KKK. So,
and to think that's, I mean, I was born in the 80s, so I mean, 30 years ago, and we're still dealing with some of the same things even today, even though it's not talked about. Maybe, I mean, let's just be honest. This KKK hasn't gone away. They're still very prevalent, and they're still doing very dark things.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for sharing that. I know that those conversations are never easy to talk about, but it led you to where you are today. So I want to lean in for just a minute and get a little bit even deeper into your past. So you hit your teenage years. and you had some things occur to you that kind of led you to where you are now. So right now, you lead this incredible Straight Street ministry in Douglasville. So talk a little bit about what Straight Street is and kind of the backstory that led you to get there.
Well, it's a vision that God gave me in the early 2000s, and or it might have been before 2000s. I'm not sure. 99, 2000, somewhere in there, and just gave me a glimpse. And he gave me the name. I had no idea about exploitation at the time. I worked with teenagers then, but I didn't like them. Didn't like working with them. And so I'm like, okay, what is this? And kind of like just set it at the back burner. Uh, but going back, I had been sexually abused at 5, from 5 to 9, and then exploited. But I didn't know it was exploitation at 14 by a preacher.
Wow.
He was about 25 years old. And so again, there was no name for it. There was no word for it. I actually thought I made a choice to be with him. He had groomed me and my family for months, and very charismatic. So, just weaved himself into the family, basically.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when God gave me the vision and he gave me the scripture, Acts 9. Do you have your Bible?
Mm-hmm.
Is it Acts 9 where Saul became Paul?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
And
that's
he
right.
sent him to the street called Straight
Mm-hmm.
To meet the prophet.
Yep.
And so I remember going to that scripture because that's what I heard that morning. Straight Street.
Yeah.
And so I remember just looking that up and studying that, and I was like, okay. And he said, everyone that comes through Straight Street, the scales will fall off their eyes. They will be made
Wow.
whole.
That's good.
But who did he send first? Paul.
Yeah.
Paul had to go through. And we know after Paul went through the street called Straight, like his ministry was like I was talking about him to somebody the other day. I'm like, Paul was a beast in the ministry, and he wasn't just going to, just wayside people. He was going to the church, and I know, because I know for myself that God had called me way back when as a child. And I remember telling him in the darkness of my bedroom, no, I don't want to come to you right now. Wait till I'm my grandmother's age, because I want to have fun. I want to do blah, 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 blah. So he does visits us, and he does put his hand on our life, but we carve out our own paths, and he's at every corner, with somebody. Like, I had strategic people in my life, throughout my life, that loved on me in spite of, that gave me what I didn't have at home, that affection and love and correction and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we are to the people that I work with. I come off as a very strong, structured person, but it's balance. I'm talking about with the girls, because I know what works. I know what I needed. I know what I wanted, and I know from the lack of that, it definitely affected those areas in my life. So I'm very structured with the girls. And again, there's that balance, because sometimes they see a different side of me, in its time, like a playful side. I think I'm like one of the funniest people in the world, but my children will be the only people to hate on me. They're like, you're funny, Mom. So, but all of that is necessary, because I felt like if I had that structure, if I had boundaries growing up, that a lot of those places that I went to, instead of going to Straight Street, I would have thought before I treaded those areas.
So I'm interested, like, kind of twofold, because you had to heal before you could lead. You had to kind of recognize the pain, and I know you shared that it wasn't for a little bit that you even kind of saw that and found healing from it. It wasn't like that exploitation happened and you found immediate healing the next day. You took you years to find that. So I'm
Right.
interested, kind of, if you could answer too, because I think bringing this up and even knowing that at the end of the day, the church was kind of part of your story in that exploitation. I wonder if you could maybe answer in two ways. One, how did you find healing in the church? Because I know you are a Christian, you love Jesus, but you also found pain in that. So how did you heal through that? Because I bet there's going to be people listening who are going, I was hurt by the church and I went the other direction. I just cut the church off altogether. But then also, what was that point of recognition for you where it clicked, like, this was not right. This should not have happened. This was me being exploited by somebody else. How did you find healing in that?
So that first part, I'm telling you, it was people in my life, outside of my family, that showed me love. There were some people in the church, some people not in the church. So there may have been some type of balance. Like, whenever you're abused or exploited, you don't tend to think of yourself as a victim.
No.
Like I said, because of the manipulation from the trafficker or the exploiter, you think you made this decision. And so I didn't really think that he had even abused me or used me.
Wow.
That came later when I recognized it through the girls I started working with here in Atlanta. So, but I believe, I got to say this before I move on, but I believe the enemy's plan, because it wasn't just one preacher, it was actually two. But I mostly talk about the one that I was actually having sex with. Because the second one, took me to they have like the houses next to the church where he lived, because he was actually pastoring this church. He took me to this house to have sex with me. And I was like, no, like, once he got on top of me, I was like, no, and he actually respected that, got up, took me home. Wow. So I really don't talk about him as much as the one that I was engaged with. But I believe the enemy's plan was to completely just make me hate the church and hate men, and those two things did not happen in my life.
No.
I mean, I'm telling you, God is strategic, and it doesn't take much. The exposure, it doesn't take much. Now, some people might go to the opposite side or run away from it because, they shut down. People, deal with stuff differently. I can't, speak on that really, because we deal with stuff differently. The resilience that I've had, or that's in me, I can't tell you, because I know it would probably have killed somebody else, or they would have killed themselves, enduring some of the things that I went through. But I'm telling you, I just know it was God and the strategic people that he placed throughout my life. And then the second part of that was
finding that recognition and healing, even just for yourself, but as you were going into Straight Street.
Well, in high school, on the last day of my high school year, because I would get depressed at the end of every school year, and didn't know it was depression, because that was the first time I was molested, on the last day of my kindergarten school year.
Wow.
And so this depression would just at the same time every year. And I didn't recognize it until my senior year in high school. And I was having the best year of my life. Oh my goodness, that was like the best year, one of the best years of my life. And but it the closer it got to graduation, that depression came.
Mm.
And I just remember just falling into this deep depression. And one teacher came by, and she was just like, "Are you okay?" And I just managed to know, and just fell into her chest. And she
Wow.
took me to our school's psychologist. And it was there with him that I learned that it was actually depression. And with him digging, I made the connection that, oh, okay, this is happening because this happened at the end of my first year in school in
Yeah.
kindergarten. And because I would, oh yeah, it was like really bad. So we made that connection there.
Mm.
And then there was like this group of girls. Some had been molested, some had been raped, so we were sexual abuse survivors in this group in my high school. And I had no idea about this group. This was like underground stuff. And I'm looking around like, oh my gosh, like I know you all, I love y'all, and da 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 da.
Mm.
I'm thinking this, I didn't say this out loud, but my point is, I was not the only person in the world.
Yeah.
You know how we think we are. I was not the
Mhm.
only person in the world dealing with this stuff.
Yeah.
So that was a breakthrough in itself for my senior year. But after high school, there was no help, um, no continuance in therapy. So I continued a lot of those destructive behaviors. Actually, stopped drinking at 21. Stopped drinking alcohol at 21. Yeah. People be like, what?
So
That's when you supposed to
that's
start.
when you're supposed to start. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I stopped.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I had to get, I used to self medicate with alcohol
Mm.
and weed. So, um, but the alcohol was more of my vice.
Mm.
So, liquor at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
So,
Just to try to suppress the pain, just to
mm,
try to get your mind to think about anything else
yeah.
at that moment.
Oh,
So I'm
yeah.
interested then, like now you're in this business, if you will. I don't, maybe it's not a business, more so a ministry, I know, but you're really at the work of helping liberate and bring freedom and healing to other individuals who are caught up in this exploitation ring, if you will. Um, so let's talk about that for a second, because you've been a part of two of these, right? In Angela's House and in Straight Street. So let's talk about those for a minute and what that process looks like. How do you find these girls? How do you help them heal? And then what are those steps for you? What does that look like?
Well, it's different. It can be different. I've only done like one physical rescue myself,
Hmm.
and that young lady ended up becoming my daughter.
Oh wow.
Um, but and she had ran from a placement she was in. So, but when she called me, she was like the one physical rescue. Like I went downtown and got her and kind of locked her in, child lock, had
Yeah.
somebody sitting in the back seat to control her. So that was like one. But for the most part, working inside of Angela's house and with another program, um, they would come through another nonprofit called Georgia Cares. And then we would do like an intake process, and it just depended if they were coming as a parental referral or DJJ defects or through Georgia Cares. But
Hmm.
yeah, those look different too. I mean, because we were getting kids, we could get kids like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning if there had been like a bus. Um, One in particular, there was a bus at a strip club in Atlanta, and it was discovered that one of the dancers was like 17. So we got her probably like 3 o'clock in the morning. So when I got to work that morning, she was there.
Yeah.
You know.
Wow. That's just crazy to me. Uh, our world's so broken.
Yeah.
So I'm interested, as we talked through this the first time. You kind of you brought up a really good point of how we kind of train our children, in ways that we can help kind of stop this or bring about change to help awareness, if you will. So, what are some ways, if you're a parent listening, if you're even a child listening, like, what are some ways? Because I think, we always were taught the stranger danger method, right? Like, don't talk to strangers. They're bad people. They're all going to kidnap you. And not to say that couldn't happen,
Right.
but you had a pretty good insight, I feel like, on how do we actually bring about some change within that. So what does that look like? What can we do differently or shift the way that we teach our kids?
Well, definitely don't focus on the stranger danger. I mean, you have to teach that you can't just go off with people you don't know. You can't just and I think we as parents have to determine, like, because this is the type of parent I was. You know, my children had to speak whenever they entered a room. So, good morning, they had to speak, and the yes ma'am, no ma'am, yes sir, no sir, that sort of thing. That's how I was raising them. Even if they spoke, I made sure they understood, like, even if they spoke to a stranger, like when they entered a room, like good morning or good afternoon, I made sure they understood, if you feel any kind of way, like, because we have a Noah, and I would tell them, this is your Noah, and I touch my belly. You just have that feeling that you're uncomfortable, something don't feel right, you're just uneasy. Trust that. Trust that you are not being rude by getting up, not saying anything, and exiting, or getting closer to mama or daddy or auntie or miss such and such, that you do know that's not being rude. Just remove yourself. Um, so I thought like all of that was important to share with my kids. Just let them know the truth, because for me, I had those feelings around certain people, and it was I wouldn't move. I wouldn't go. There's like so much to my story. Like, there's so much stuff that people hadn't even heard. And when I share tidbits of certain things, they'd be like, "Oh my gosh, what else?"
Yeah.
But that's why I said, some people would have just ended their lives going through what I went through, um, but God. Um, but I stayed. I stayed because I didn't know that I could have gotten up and walked away, or just went somewhere safer. I just didn't know. So I definitely shared that with my children. Just, if you feel uncomfortable, because they know.
Yeah.
Oh, a child will tell you. And if your child, you got your kid in your arms, and they look at somebody and they might bury their face in their chest, that doesn't mean that person is spooky or a molester or something like that. But your child just don't want to be bothered with them. So respect that.
Yeah.
And don't push them off. Oh no, girl, turn your head around and speak to him or speak to her. No, just respect that, because she don't want to be bothered with that person.
You spoke a lot. You spoke a lot into the importance of listening, and that you felt like if you had been listened to sooner, that maybe things would be different. Or I know you've had stories along the way of people that have shared stories that you've heard that people didn't listen. What are some ways that we can be intentional to listen? Do we have to take super action on everything that somebody says, or what are the right ways to kind of listen and take action so that we can protect our kids if something is happening and they're saying something? Are there ways, good markers that we can give our kids to help that conversation so we can see like, hey, what's actually going on, or how can we help them find, I guess, healing or freedom from what could be exploitation moment or a moment of abuse?
Well, definitely listening, because listening first, because the moment you shut a kid down or disregard something that they are trying to say, you basically like lost this kid.
Mm.
Not completely, but in their mind it's like, they're not gonna listen. Because my oldest child, is something I used to do to her, and I learned about, I got better over the years. But when she'd be trying to tell her story, she pauses like I do. And back then I was had no patience with people, not even myself. But this is my oldest child, and she'd tell her stories, and I'd be like, okay, hurry up, get it out, get it out. And so she started like talking really fast to get, and just talking really fast to anybody, because in her mind she would see her mama, hurry up, get it out, get it out, get it out. you know so if you shut a kid down even that one time, it's just important to listen. I'm saying that because it's important to listen to what they're saying, because if they feel like they're not being heard, then it'll come out in a different way, maybe acting out, or being defiant, something. So it's kind of like you're gonna have to start putting pieces of the puzzle. You kind of have to start putting the puzzle together just to understand what's really going on behind this child's behavior.
Mm.
And so that's where we are when they come into care from the exploitation. Because first of all, they're not self-identifying as a victim. So, they're blaming everybody for why they're in care and all that kind of stuff. He didn't do this to me. I wanted to do this. So now you're trying to put pieces together just so that you can start helping or start understanding. So first of all, listen. And if you are the type of person like I was that, wasn't really listening, or not didn't have the patience at the time, you can always reverse that by just sitting down and just focusing in on this one child. And
Mm.
I'm talking about your children.
Yeah.
Focusing in on this one child and just giving them your undivided attention. Because I was able to turn that around with my oldest. I had her at 17, and she told me probably last year or so. She was like, "Mom, you know what I realized?" I was like, "You and my daddy was like really young." I was like, "Yeah." So, because like a lot of things that I did, she started understanding more, because we were still walking through some stuff um, some years ago, but God taught me how to be a mom, and did pretty good.
That's so good.
She just had to get the brunt end of it.
The first child always does. It's okay. For any first children listening tonight, we're sorry, but your parents were learning.
Right.
So let's ask this: how does race play a part in all of this, or does it? Especially within exploitation and abductions and things like that. How does race play a part in what you do?
Well, it has its place. We have variables as far as the race cars or whatever, could be pretty broad. It could be all my opinion, but it definitely plays a part. I think one thing I don't want to do is paint a picture of traffickers or exploiters, because I want people to be mindful that you have familial trafficking or exploitation where it's somebody inside your family, but um and then are the people that buy children or want children for pornography or sex, you know, they can look any kind of way. But there are some preferences, you know, there are some preferences to and I believe, again, this could be my, like, all of my opinion, because there's numbers, and we really can't get good data on this stuff because, again, we're not self-identifying as victims,
Mhm.
but there's preferences for uh, our little white babies,
Mhm.
young, 11, 12, um, preferences for boys. I mean, these people are sick.
Mhm.
But as far as the race, yeah, it has a part in there.
Mhm.
And I think I shared something with you before, and even then I was trying to be careful
Yeah.
about that because I really don't want people to have that mindset to, you know, trafficker, painting a picture. You don't want to paint a picture.
Yeah.
But and I will tell you this, as far as being able to put your finger on it, on whether it is I'm gonna scratch that. I'm not even gonna go to that.
That's
I
fair.
have to
That's
be
good.
careful.
I know you're doing great, and I appreciate you just even sharing. I know you're trying to toe a very careful line of not having us all walk down the street and point fingers at people,
Right.
um, and making sure that we're equally sharing. Like it's important for us to be super careful on all fronts when it comes to these topics.
Oh,
And you even bring up an important piece of the familial side of it, and how I mean I think I again I should have pulled some research and statistics on this as well, but I know that a lot of kidnappings and abductions often happen from somebody that the other person knows. That
yeah.
there's not as many just kind of snatch and grabs out in the middle of public as there are. I know somebody, or like that connection already, similar to what you shared at the beginning of the story of how people kind of weave their way into the fabric of your life for that very purpose.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so it's not that we walk around uh, arm extended from everybody else,
Mm.
right? But it is important that, as you've already mentioned, that we're listening when our children are speaking, that we're listening when a victim is speaking, a survivor is speaking. Like it's important for us to be available to hear the cries of those who are hurting, and not to negate or ignore them because their experience isn't our experience. And we talked, I shared some things with you, and we know that even though our stories are different, it doesn't mean that my story is better than yours or your story is better than mine. Both of them are bad stories, and both of them are heartbreaking stories. And at the end of it all, it's important for us to be a part of helping solve I would say, kind of the latchkey children problem that we have, where so many of our children are left alone. And I know because parents are struggling to survive,
Oh,
but
yeah.
that's how they try to do it. They just, and I know. So I just want to encourage us, like, if you're struggling today, if you're hurting today, if you need help today, to reach out, to have the conversations. If you want to talk to us, that's great. If you want to talk to a professional, there's no shame in it. I
Right.
went and had professional counseling, and had I not, I'm telling you, I don't think I'd be where I was today. I know you did as well, Jessica. Like without it, I'm telling you, like there's no shame in it.
Yeah.
At least there shouldn't be. And
No,
so,
not at all. And I wanted to add that, because I would be remiss to say, when we were talking about the race side, the culture just in this nation, in this world, you know, language is very important.
Mm.
And so in our culture, we have glamorized pimp. You know, if you say pimp, you might automatically think of a tall, slender black man with a purple suit on, with a matching hat and a cane,
Mm.
um, with a big, flashy car. Well, that is not the case.
Yeah,
Those were 70s characters,
that's good.
if you will. And so, again, language is very important. Um, Prostituting in reference to children should not be in the same sentence.
Mm.
Should not be in the same sentence. I had this conversation with someone yesterday, and he was a young man, and he said, "Oh, you work with those girls that are prostitutes?" And I said, "Excuse me, you work with the girls that are prostitutes?" I was like, "Okay, do me a favor. Don't say that again.
Yeah.
That is far from the truth."
Mm.
And he was like, "Oh no, that's what I've been told." No, that's far from the truth. These are survivors.
Mm.
These They were victims. They are survivors. So we have to be mindful of words, of the language. You know, using pimp and pimping like it's just, you know,
Mm-hmm.
just anything. Like it just, I know it's slang, but yeah, I've basically conditioned myself to take it out of my conversations whenever I'm doing trainings and trying to, I say, exploiter or
Mm-hmm.
trafficker or, um, you know, those
Those
type of
those
things.
aren't as glamorous of terms.
Right.
I agree with you because when you said that, even for me, again, that triggered like, oh yeah, fancy guy, right? Nice suit, feather coming out of his hat, big car, lots of money, lives in luxury. But you're right, like it glamorizes a very dark uh, and disgusting lifestyle that hinges on his ability to manipulate and exploit those who are seemingly hurting and broken themselves.
Hmm.
So I think I like that's a great. I know we didn't talk about that originally, so I appreciate you even just throwing that in because I think that's a great shift. And I've been learning language. How do we shift even the way we talk about certain things when it even comes to the race situation as well?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've had a great friend on our staff who's helped shape that and mold that within me. Like, why do we call them white lies and black lies or bad lies? Why are white lies okay, but like other lies are like so it's just even in that like that subtlety, or why is it called the black sheep of the family? Like, so why is that a bad thing? So like language matters, and maybe I can convince her to come on here and talk about it because she does a way better job than I do.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think like it does it shapes and molds the way that we mentally uh, position ourselves to think about that person or that action.
Of
Um,
course. If you
and
say,
so
if you say, "Oh, she's a prostitute,"
mm,
you're gonna treat her a lot different
exactly right.
if I came to you and said, "Okay, this child has been exploited
Mm,
or trafficked," and then your heart is going to be like, "Oh my gosh, what can I
yeah,
do? How can I help?"
yeah.
Because that's just the nature of the beast that we call this society. You
Mm,
know, we put a name on everything, whether it's positive or negative, and then we deal with that person, that place, or that thing in, whatever it's attached to, that name or situation that it's attached to. That's
mm,
why those antennas go up when you put those words together in the same sentence with my girls,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So yeah. And then hold my mule because like I want a box now because we
That's good. Jessica, before we wrap up, I think this is, first of all, a great takeaway and a great resource and opportunity for people to grow. Is to shift the way that we think and talk
yes.
about these things that are going on. But are there any other resources or places you would point people to help to really pull back the veil maybe on what they have heard and what is true, what is accurate?
Oh yeah, of course. So I would encourage people to look up Shared Hope International.
Okay.
I'm an ambassador with them. They're international, great source of information. They have a book called Renting Lacey.
Mm.
I had about 6 copies, and you start letting people. So I have zero now. Got to start all over. But Renting Lacey is a great book that you could read and share with the children, or let your 12 and older read maybe.
Mm.
Um, Parents definitely should read it. They have other books as well, but you can go on Shared Hope International, and you could see your state's report card as
Oh,
far
wow.
as trafficking is concerned. Yeah, I believe last year Georgia finally made an A.
Mm.
So and they're looking at the laws,
Mhm.
how survivors are handled, the resources that we have in place for survivors. So it covers a lot, in order to get this A. And then you would be astounded if you click on another state and find a C, and then it would give you a list of why that state still has a C.
Wow.
And because it's just amazing. See, I was about to go into something else. There's so much to this, but I'm gonna stick to it. And then let's see other resources. And then of course you can check us out, Straight Street Life Center.org, our website and our Facebook page, very active. And let us know if you need any trainings.
Mm.
If you would like to donate, we're a 501c3 nonprofit. Um, we have a very secure way to give. You could text SAVE one to 44321.
Mm.
That's SAVE, the number one, to 44321.
I want to encourage people to do that and take that opportunity. We'll post that in the chat as well, so that way people can know how to do that. Jessica, I just want to say one last cool opportunity for people to learn is to watch your TED Talk coming out soon enough. Hopefully, I know you just recorded that about a week ago. I'm excited to hear it.
Saturday.
Yeah, it's less than that. Yeah, so I'm excited to hear it. I wish it was already out, but I know we got a little bit of time for them to do their magic behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So when it comes out, we'll share that out as well. Great opportunity to learn and to grow in that way. So as we close out, I like to close out the same way week as well, and just remind
Mhm.
people that things don't change overnight; they take time. That this is really just an opportunity for us to learn in humility, to learn from one another, and to recognize that we're not all the same. We don't all have the same experiences and life stories. We can all learn from one another, and hopefully make this world a better place for my children, my children's children to grow up in. Jessica, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for your vulnerability and your willingness to share today. And I know you held back, so I appreciate your restraint as well. And maybe we'll bring you back on here for a full all access, no holds barred
Let's
conversation at
do
one
it.
point. But thank you so much. Hey, join us next Thursday evening. We'll have somebody else on this week, next week. I think his story is going to be just as fun to listen to as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in.